got to meet in person at Frame by Frame, I believe it was the very first Frame by Frame Film Festival when your film, I believe, was
Right,
at Tenna Nets
right.
screened. And so it's really nice to be able to have you back at the festival, and this time with a new film, but also in an equally beautiful location. Um, so your film Gifted, would you talk a little bit about maybe your relationship to environment and how and why you pick locations to shoot?
Okay. It's always a combination of opportunity and vision. So my method of working is to collaborate very closely with choreographers, and um, these are all, as you might be familiar with, labors of love. There's really not much of a budget to do any of these things. So the idea is to find a choreographer and a location and find a match. It's funny that you bring up my previous film in Ghana at Tenna Nets, because it also was by a body of water. And in that case, it was, uh, in both cases, they were near the Atlantic Ocean, just different parts. So in the piece that we made in Almada, Portugal, is just across the river from Lisbon. And the dance company I was working with is based in Almada. And so they gave me a half a dozen places that they thought that the work might be presented, both in terms of the dances that they had in mind and what we could do with the camera. And that process is always interesting for me, because as I go and scout these places, I'm going to places that I never would have known about or visited or explored without this connection. In fact, all these films are, for me, they're much about discovery, what's possible, how can I see the world that wouldn't be accessible to me unless I was engaged in this kind of process.
Yeah, I love that. And this film Gifted, which will be on a program titled Hide and Seek on, I believe it's November 3rd in Frame by Frame. Um, it has it. There's a lot of reference in your description to it to sculpture, and there is this very big participant in the film, which is a staircase. So, yeah, what can you share about that?
So that particular location is a park, and so the dance company was very instrumental in getting us access to this. And early in the morning, hopefully, we would have it to ourselves. For me, this stairway to heaven that goes nowhere was totally intriguing. It and I'm thinking of. There's I can't remember the title right now, but there's a famous film with Shirley Temple, and her African American co-star dances down the stairs. I wish I could remember his name, but it's
The
escaping me.
Bojangles, maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And that's an extraordinary scene. So I had sort of had that in the back of my mind. The dances that they were doing and their approach to that physicality, geography of that staircase was different. And of course, it gave me lots of opportunities to play with the editing, which is that's something I'm really focused on. I'm always trying to make a piece that doesn't exist in real life. So if you watch people perform, it would be nothing like the work that we make together by using the cinema tools.
For you and the work that I've seen that you've made, environment is it's just like a very big player in what you're making. And it made me think about the dancers and their process of creating movement, and whether, at what point that was moved on location. And yeah, how
Yeah,
closely?
this was a challenge which Raquel Tavares and Mariana Romano really rose to, and really um, understood what I was asking of them. So this performance Gifted was part of a festival that was held a few weeks before our filming. And this, of course, all that work was on stage, and I got to see a number of pieces. Choreographers came from many. It was an international festival, and so that was sort of a preview for me to see work that I thought could be transformed by bringing it to a space and contacting choreographers and dancers who would be available. And it's always somewhat of a Rubik's cube putting all those pieces together. So this park at the border of the river is a place that they suggested, and so we looked at the elements of the dance. The stage performance had been recorded, and we were able to discuss, what if we took this part and put it here, and what if we modified that and so it would work on the stairs and so forth. So it was a real process of collaboration.
Yeah, I love that.
And as you mentioned, it's all the way a dialogue between the dance and the space, and I'm looking for a way to bring the space to life so that we can inhabit that space in a way that would be distinct if the dancers weren't there.
Right, exactly. You want to do something new. Yeah, exactly. Bring life, inhabit the space. Absolutely. And I, if I'm remembering correctly, you personally do not have a dance background. Is that right?
No, my training was at the San Francisco Art Institute, which was one of the oldest art schools in the country, and recently had to close for financial reasons, like so many art schools. And for the first half of my career, I was making documentaries, political and social documentaries. And the burden there is to, represent ideas and often incorporate controversial viewpoints. And I reached a certain point where I became less excited about talking heads and more excited about what brought me to film in the first place, which is color and movement and shape and composition. And so there's a great freedom for me in making dance films, and the generosity of the people I collaborate with has made it possible. So I go in and say, I appreciate the dance. I have my opinions in dance, but I'm just an outsider, which is typical in my documentary work too. Advantages and disadvantages of being an outsider.
That's right.
And so they take responsibility for how the dance is conceived, how movement happens, and they are gracious and generous and let me take responsibility of how we're going to frame and present this so that it works on a screen. Because typically my collaborators are unfamiliar or don't accept as viewers of film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of refreshing. It really allows for um, because I think in screen dance in particular, it's a lot of choreographers who move and all of a sudden are interested in working with the camera and the choreography of the edit. But to have someone with that background first and foremost, and then enter the dance world is
It's really every time it's a matter of creating and nurturing trust, because it's their image on the screen, but I'm trying to make something that fits with how I see the world, and how I want to use the vocabulary of cinema.
yeah, yeah. So the would you well, I have another question, and that is the the music. Oh, first of all, the editing techniques. I feel like you definitely took some really fun. You made some really fun choices in the editing. Do you want to share a little bit about the idea of the image reflection?
It's always a challenge in terms of what level of intervention I'm going to use in the editing, because um, it, there's a school of dance which wants to see the whole body and wants to see the whole body moving in space. And I'm much more interested. You can, you see that on a stage production, but in screen dance, the advantages is we can divide things up. We can use the edge of the frame, and we can do not only different angles but close-ups, which are so powerful on film. But if you do too much of it, it becomes a gimmick. You're just looking at, oh, look at this editing program. It can turn and spin things upside down, and so finding that balance between using the editing techniques to emphasize or enhance or underline a particular movement, phrase, or perspective is what I'm trying to do, and yet not cross over to using the technique just for its own sake. And others can judge whether I'm more or less successful in striking that balance.
Well, I think there was definite purpose. I mean, I think just anyway, just with the repetition of the staircase, like that reflected in the kind of the replication of the body image certainly made sense to me. And then would you share a little bit about the music and the sound?
That's a very tough question. You kind of put me on the spot.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I can only be honest. The music that was originally used, the choreographer was very, very attached to it, and it was impossible to license. So I made a choice that I think works, but the choreographer just didn't share that perspective, because the dance in her mind went with the music she had previously chosen, which was just not possible. So, and why it's a hard question is because I don't like to disappoint my collaborators.
Of course, but also, there are limitations and restrictions on how we can make this. And I think just being a part of the screen dance world, we're just a little bit more familiar about kind of what it takes to make certain things.
And I'd like to go on and say, I personally, I found the work that Lloyd Rogers had done and made freely accessible really exciting. And one of the benefits of working with music that's freely available is that you can alter it, you can use various pieces, you have so much freedom, whereas if you're using a licensed piece, that's not often the case.
Right, exactly. It's very helpful creatively to have the freedom to be able to explore your own editing of that piece of music, but also it just sets it apart, right? If the piece is just maybe perhaps more well known, generally speaking, it just there's also a lot of baggage that comes with people's associations with certain music.
Right. Right. And it happens to filmmakers too, that they put a temp track in and then you fall in love with it and then you're really messed up because
Yes. I mean, I understand. That is hard. That is so hard. I was just talking with Jordan Fuchs yesterday about his piece, and he created the entire film and then sent it to a composer to score. The entire thing was just made from the perspective of the dance and the filmmaker, and the sound was the very last thing to be put on.
That's a real benefit. You asked me earlier whether I come from the dance world, and one of the most surprising things to me as I began this work is that invariably the choreographers I worked with over a long period now, they develop the movement totally in the absence of any sound, and that after the movements are solidified to whatever degree they are, some people leave improvisation throughout, then they go and find music which complements it. And I always thought that people were dancing to music, but that's so far from the case.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I created a film called Quiver once, and I thought I was going to drive the dancers absolutely crazy because I had them dancing to an electronic metronome the entire time. Yeah, but yeah, there are many ways to make that possible. But it is very difficult when you fall in love with a piece of music and then can't use it. So I certainly understand that, but I absolutely applaud your choice to do things, um, you know, correctly. Um, Wonderful. So, Mark, what is next for you and your creative?
You would have a whole series of hard questions without,
Um,
giving my personal litany. The last 3 years have been really challenging for me. The COVID, of course. Have been teaching. We last spring was the first time I was in a classroom for a whole semester. So there was COVID. Then I had a serious health challenge, which I'm fine now, but um, took me away from thinking about anything else. And then what happened? I'm retiring from work and only teaching half semester, so one semester a year. So I'm trying to reinvent myself that way. And then my house flooded. I've just been back after living in temp houses for 6 months.
oh my
So the short
goodness.
short answer is I don't know what's next.
That's okay. You've had enough on your mind, but you're certainly getting a lot of experiences from which to draw from eventually. But oh my goodness, I'm so sorry, Mark. That's a lot to.
Everything is on the upswing. I'm past all of those, but I haven't had, I'm waiting for the well to fill, if that makes any sense.
Yes, absolutely does. It absolutely does. I usually have to wait for the well to fill much longer than people think maybe I should
Yeah.
have to wait. But there's something to be said for that, to be ready to make something.
Mhm.
I feel like I read something somewhere about artists make when the pain of not making is more than the pain of making, or something like that. I don't know if that makes any sense, but
That's a corollary. If the work is never done, it's just abandoned.
yes, 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 exactly. Um, yeah, all the price to pay for being an artist.
No,
um,
speaking of gifts, that's the title spoke to me because all of this work is a gift to me and with luck from me. So it struck a chord.
yeah, I was going to ask you about the title. When did that come about in the
That was
process?
the original title of the choreography, and I certainly defer to the artists. They have. I mean, what I love about it is that it's means many different but complementary things. A person is gifted if they're particularly talented, or if you receive a gift, you're gifted, right? Or if you give a gift to somebody, you're gifting. So I love um, openness in titles in the work itself. I never want to say it just means this.
Sure. Yeah. But what I'm hearing is just gratitude also.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's
Yeah. That gratitude is when I can get in touch with it. One of the keys to getting through all the, you're not in charge. Life is uncertain.
right. Yes. Yes. So true. Well, Mark, is there anything else that you would like to share about this work? And yeah.
Just that see the work as an ongoing evolution, and I'm really eager to share not just this piece but a larger perspective of my pieces. And I'll plug my website, Mark Freeman Films. If anybody wants to see something or has questions, I'm always glad to hear from people.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. And I actually am now remembering, I believe that I saw your name listed on another program in Houston for maybe Dance Source Houston's film
That's
fest.
right.
So I feel like you have an audience here in Houston. That's great.
Well, when I made this film, it was sort of it was a trip to Europe. I had been invited to a festival in Italy, so I made a film in Italy And then I had previously been at this festival in Portugal and followed that up since I was, in the neighborhood.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful.
Well,
Well,
I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'd love if there's any kind of audience response. I wish I were there, but you could clue me in. I'd love to hear what people think about the movie.
I would love to share that. Absolutely. Well, thank you for being a part of Frame by Frame again. And it's actually kind of a nice festival this year because there are several filmmakers who are returning.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, that is definitely something that I love doing is, people start to call back things they've seen in the past and relate them to the work. So it's anyway, I feel like there's a portion of the festival that can be a nice kind of catalog of people's works and get to know
I was on a
filmmakers.
screening committee for a film festival, dance festival in LA, and so I saw 8 hours out of 300 perhaps that were and gave me the other side of the perspective of what it takes to put one of these things on. And so I want to thank you again for creating these opportunities. Because it's we make the stuff, it doesn't exist unless somebody sees it.
Right, right. Well, absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much, Mark.